Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my co host and dear friend, Jake McQuire. And believe it or not, the only professional team not actually located in Charlotte, North Carolina, that is represented in the Carolinas are the Carolina Hurricanes, who play out close to the Raleigh. And they are 2 wins away from advancing to the Stanley Cup for the first time in 20 years, going back to the 2005 2006 season when they won it all. And it got me thinking, like reminiscing, like this is kind of cool, like anniversary wise, like 20 years after the fact. The only like of the top four, like you talk MLS, MLB. Actually, no, it's not MLS. It's MLB, NFL, NHL, and hold on, what's the other four major sport?
NBA.
NBA. Yep, almost forgot the NBA. And the Hornets just were doing their thing this past year. But out of those four, the Hurricanes are the only one with a title. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I'm not a big hockey fan, but it is awesome to see after the past couple of years the shellacking the Florida Panthers have given the Hurricanes to be again 2 games from the doorstep of the Stanley Cup. Jacob, your thoughts on this? We had the Memorial Day holiday, a lot of holidays, a lot of anniversaries, a lot of potential what if could be's. How's your week been?
All that stuff is super cool, but today marks the start of the Panthers OTAs, and that's what I care about the most. Seeing all these practice videos of just Bryce Young handing the ball off to Jonathan Brooks, maybe Xavier Legette making a catch. This is what gets me going in the summer months when we don't have football. The Canes point is pretty cool, right? Because the last time the Canes won the Stanley Cup was I think when we were in elementary school. Like it's been a long, long time. So, and you mentioned MLS, like Charlotte FC has done their thing a little bit, but yeah, it's cool to see the Canes get there. We don't have an MLB team. Yeah, I think that was one of the other sports that you mentioned, but they are talking about an expansion and North Carolina being one of those potential expansion sites. So I don't watch baseball as it is. I think it's boring to watch on TV, but if Carolina or Charlotte gets an MLB team, I will be rooting for them.
Definitely rooting for them. I've been to a Charlotte Knights game, the minor league
Those are
joint that we
fun
have
to
in
go
town.
to for sure.
Yeah. And then you have the what is it? The Charlotte Checkers is I think
Yeah.
our minor league hockey team. So we definitely have a lot of sports in the Charlotte area. But yeah, for of those four major league teams, a lot of times they kind of stay in one city. And in the case of the Carolinas, you have one team in Raleigh and the rest in Charlotte. So just an interesting dichotomy as we kind of talk about and lead up into what we want to discuss today. And that's kind of the draft hits going back since the franchise start in 1995. A lot of these are on 1995, 2005, 2015. This past year, we made the playoffs in 2025. And you look at the runs the Panthers have made, they have been kind of on those decade markers after the team started the franchise. So I don't know, maybe that's a good year for us. 2035 could be the year the Panthers finally win the Super Bowl when Bryce Young's entering the moonlight of his career. But Jacob, let's start with the positives and give me your fifth best pick since 1995. And the way we're doing this exercise, guys, you cannot choose a player that was drafted in the top 10. The idea of players drafted then, you expect them to be superstars. Your Cam Newtons, your Jordan Grosses, your Julius Peppers, Luke Kuechly, like all of these players were taken within the top 10, expected to be superstars. They were superstars. We're looking at players past that point that made a difference for this franchise in meaningful ways. Who is your guy at number 5 as we work our way up to 1? And then we'll do the flip of this and see who the worst picks were, obviously within the first 100 picks, since we did after pick 100 a couple weeks ago. Kick us off. Who you got?
I'm gonna throw my honorable mention out there first. I didn't want to do any first rounders because, like you're saying, I think it's kind of obvious that a lot of the first rounders that Carolina drafted are going to be the very, very good players. The superstars, the Pro Bowlers, the Hall of Famers with Pep and Luke Kuechly. You didn't mention CMC, but he's a superstar as well. Like D'Angelo Wood, like all these guys. Carolina's been pretty good at drafting first rounders. Um, my honorable mention, I'm going to say, is Dan Morgan. He was a really good player, 11th pick, and he's done, I think, a very good job cleaning up the mess of the previous regime as the Panthers general manager. So him staying within the Carolina family there, that's why he's an honorable mention. He was a Pro Bowler on the field, but his work as the general manager puts him in there for me as well. I so my group here, I wouldn't say that I ordered it necessarily, but I'll just go in reverse from the picks, all right? Like I'll start with the pick closest to pick 100. Another thing that I'm going to say is the number one guy you're going to talk about, obviously Steve Smith. I thought he was too good to like be in this. Like I would have put him in the top 10 group or not including. So he's not on my list, even though he's clearly the best third round pick in the history of this franchise. But I'll start with a player from 2007, pick 83, so a third rounder, defensive end from Georgia, Charles Johnson. I think during the '07, he was imperative in '08 and up to the early 2010s run, like where we make the playoffs with Cam, eventually make the Super Bowl. I think Charles Johnson was huge for that. He was eventually the number one guy for our team. And while people like Greg Hardy would come and go, Mario Addison took a while, Wes Horton took a while to come along. I think Charles Johnson was a constant for this team. 143 games played with 67 and a half sacks. He is, I guess we can say, number 5 on my list.
Before I get the number 5, I'll talk about Charles Johnson briefly because he did make my honorable mentions.
Okay.
And there's only one first rounder that cracked my top 5. He'll be at number 4, but my honorable mentions included Thomas Davis, who was picked 14 in the year he was drafted. I have Charles Johnson. I have a guy like Trey Turner, Taylor Moton, and even Mike Rucker. So some great Panther legends that just missed the cutoff. And I think the reason why Charles Johnson isn't there for me is because I never felt like he was truly like one of the cornerstone pieces. I feel like Mike Rucker, especially on that Super Bowl run in 2003, had more of an impact than Charles Johnson did in 2015 or 2013 for the Panthers. Is he a legend? Is he a stud? Absolutely. Like I said, he's on my honorable mentions list. He would be in my top 10. But if we're talking top
Well,
5,
let's talk about Mike Rucker because he would be number 4 on my list as well.
wow. Okay.
Like you said, pivotal player in the early stages of the Panthers. He and Chris Jenkins were like the dudes. Chris Mangan was there as well, but they were like the staples on that defensive line leading up to the early Super Bowl run for this franchise. So I included Mike Rucker as well. He 139 games. Not all of those were with Carolina, but I thought he looking at 55 and a half sacks in 1999. He was the second round pick in 1999. He was on my list as well.
And he, like any rational Panthers fans, I'm not going to discredit you for having Charles Johnson, Mike Rucker on your list. They just didn't make the cut for me because, again, I'm looking at impact kind of on the field. When you think about like Panthers legends, who comes to mind? And for me at 5, it's Mike Minter. Like he was the heart of the back end for those 2000 Panthers defenses. So like when we talk about the defensive line, Chris Jenkins, Julius Peppers, they kind of overshadow Mike Rucker a little bit. Like I said, I think he kind of goes in that same bucket with Charles Johnson, but he wasn't the superstar. Neither of those guys kind of ended their career or time as like the Panthers all-time great. Like if you build an all-time great on either side, I think Mike Minter makes the cut as one of those safeties. So again, just when you look at legacy, what his impact was on the back end for us. And I get if you want to argue that edge position players are more valuable than safeties, you completely have it there. But in terms of just impact as being a Panther, I think Mike Minter made the cut for me at 5. And since you mentioned your 4th already, I'll name mine, and it's the only first rounder I have. So Mike Minter, he was a second round pick. He was picked 56 in 1997. For me, my 4th pick is DeAngelo Williams, who is the first round pick back in 2005. And actually, no, I think he was '05.
Yes, it was
And
'05.
he was taken with the 27th pick. So he was
Oh,
he was
06,
towards
2006.
yes, I was like 2005. We took, I
It
believe
was
it
TD.
wasn't Thomas Davis. Okay, that was the TD pick. So DeAngelo Williams was taken in 2006, and that'll that'll come back around when we talk about the worst picks, because there was a running back we took in 2005 in the second round that I think does need to be mentioned as an all-time stinker. But again, jumping ahead of myself, D'Angelo Williams, I believe he is still. Did Jonathan Stewart pass him as the all-time? Hold on. Jonathan Stewart did pass him as the all-time rushing leader, but I think when you look back at it, D'Angelo Williams still had more touchdowns and he had a better yards per carry. And he did have the mantle before Jonathan Stewart took it in the late 2010s. So when you look at just career impact, what he was with that double trouble duo back in 2008, he racked up, I believe, the most touchdowns, both like rushing and receiving in that 2008 season, beating Michael Turner out, who had a career year with the Atlanta Falcons that year. So just so many different critical points and junctures. Him and Jonathan Stewart became one of the first tandems, I believe, to both have 1,000 rushing yards in a season in 2009. So when you just look at the accolades, when you look at kind of the output he had coming out of Memphis, this was a really special player that I enjoyed growing watching up. And I think when you look back at like all-time Panthers, he's one of the best running backs we've had. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey gets thrown in there, Jonathan Stewart's up there, but those guys were top 15 picks. D'Angelo Williams was taken with pick 27, and that's where I think that gives him a little bit of a leg up, and I have him here at 4.
Like I said, I didn't do any first rounders on my list, but D'Angelo Williams is certainly a very, very good player. Number one or number two best running back in franchise history, depending on where you have McCaffrey, I would say. And while he was super explosive, super impactful, I think once Jonathan Stewart came into the league and they were able to share the backfield, just in my mind, that kind of diminishes his value a little bit because, he's splitting carries, right? It's like David Montgomery, really good for the Lions, right? But he also has Jahmyr Gibbs with it. I'm not saying Jonathan Stewart is nearly as talented as Jahmyr Gibbs, but it's a system which both guys are able to eat, as opposed to him being the staple guy for so many years. But if I were including first rounders, I think he would make the cut just because you get him outside of the top 25, and he's still such an impressive player for the Carolina Panthers. He and Jonathan Stewart were huge in that '08 run that probably could have ended in a Super Bowl if things swing the right way in the playoffs. But that was number 4 for you, right?
Yep.
You already mentioned number 3 for me. Mike Mentor's number 3 for me.
Okay.
Seven,
I was wondering if he made the list for you. You didn't mention with the honorable mentions, but it's good to hear that he's at number 3 for you.
it's funny, both the Mikes, taken in 99 and 97, both from a Nebraska defense. And people forget back in the day, Nebraska was one of the all-time powerhouses. I would still say they're a top 10 college football program ever. They just kind of fallen by the wayside. Back then, they used to put some players in the league, and Mike Mentor, I'm looking at it. He had 17 interceptions. I remember him for getting ball hawking interceptions and stuff, but he also had 11 sacks from the safety position. Really pivotal player who, like you said, brought that entire defense together for those late 90s, early 2000s playoff runs, ultimately ending up in a Super Bowl appearance in 2003. I think both he, Rucker, and then you can throw Peppers in there, but obviously Peppers was the second overall pick. All those guys were indispensable to the Super Bowl run in 2003.
He definitely was instrumental there. When we went to the NFC Championship game in 2005, he was a pivotal piece for us on the back end. I believe we had Chris Gamble too then. And it was just,
Yes.
again, when you talk about like guys that were impactful, I had a hoodie growing up. He had like a little camp at one off season and he signed it. I was the only Panthers player of that like 2000s era that I have a signature or met in person. So just a really cool experience. Really cool guy. Just really on and off the field, great dude, great leader, and it shows. He's number 5 on my list, number 3 on yours. Definitely made an impact on us, and any Panthers listener understands that that is a legend and deserves to be mentioned on a list like this. For me, I'm going to go the draft before Mike Minter, and it was another second round pick in 1996. I think he had more of an impact, and maybe you could say it's because of how things kind of soured after 2004 before his return. But Muhsin Muhammad, man, I mean, we're still talking about the fact that he holds the Super Bowl record for longest receiving touchdown pass. He is really probably, when you look at like all time, the second greatest wide receiver in our history, next to Steve Smith, who, yes, as you've kind of mentioned, is number one for me on this list. And so when you look at just his career accolades and his impact on the Carolinas, just flat out kind of like a Mike Minter situation. Like, he is a quintessential Carolina Panther, and so I can't leave him off this list. I again, the only person I think currently that could surpass him when it's all said and done is a guy like T Mac, and yeah, for that reason, he is there at number three for me.
He's probably number 1 for me. Like I said, I don't have any first rounders. I don't have Steve Smith because Steve Smith is like number 0 for this list for me. But incredible, incredible player. Longest offensive play in Super Bowl history, not just touchdown, but still the longest offensive play. Obviously, Jacoby Jones returned a kick for 110 yards and the Ravens win over the Niners. But incredible receiver, like clear second best receiver in Panthers history. And it's not like we have a ton to choose from, but after Steve Smith and Moose, it like falls off a cliff. Hopefully T Mac can get there. I know Jalen Coker had a playoff performance that was in their category there this past year, but hopefully T Mac can get there. Chris Brown, like all the young receivers we have, hopefully they can elevate their game. I was just looking at his career stuff, and obviously it's not all with Carolina, but 11,000 plus yards, 62 receiving touchdowns. That's really, even for a second rounder, that's really
He
good.
led the NFL in receiving yards in 2004, the year Steve Smith tears his Achilles. Him and
Mhm.
Jake Delhomme were kind of going off after that Super Bowl appearance. So again, like, he has his ups, and they're up there with some of the best of them.
202 games throughout his career as well. So pretty. I'm not going to say the most durable player ever, but he played well beyond 10 years, 10, 12 years.
Especially when you consider I think the big year that comes back to mind is like he spent his time with Chicago. He came back to Carolina, I believe, in 2008, and him and Steve Smith, it was like old times again. They were
Hmm.
running mates. Moose had a good year.
And that
Steve
was
Smith had a
with D'Lo and Jonathan Stewart as well. So
mhm.
that '08 season, that's the one that got away.
Yeah, it really is. And I think it just goes back to Jake Delhomme coming off the Tommy John surgery and coming off buys that year. It just wasn't meant to be. But again, it is what it is. We can go coulda, woulda, shoulda all day long. At number two, I, I'll just jump the gun. I'm guessing this is a guy that you have at number one, but it's going to be Ryan Khalil for me. I mean, this is when you talk about like persona. I don't know if he's quite the Jason Kelsey of what the Philadelphia Eagles were, but his on-off splits were insane, especially in the Cam era. It was like our offensive line was functional when he was on the field. It was not functional the second he came off. And I understand centers are considered some of the least valuable pieces, but his ability to get guys in protections, his role in pass protection and leading the way with our pretty heavy run game, it's I wouldn't say second to none, but he is by far the best center in Carolina Panthers history. Again, you make an all-time Panthers roster on each side of the ball. Mike Minter's there. I think Musa Muhammad's definitely a starting wide receiver. And in this case, I think Ryan Khalil is the starting center. So a guy that, again, just you can't say enough good things about. And the best part is we got him the second round, pick 59. So it wasn't like a top 50 pick, but it was somebody that we were able to kind of locate back in the 2007 draft and go, hey, we need you. And it kind of made up for our second round pick we made. 14 picks prior to that, which we'll get into the all-time worst. But this is a guy with two first-team All-Pros, 5 Pro Bowls. Just again, you can't say enough good things about him coming out of USC.
Yeah, I would say Moose is my 1, but Khalil's number 2 for me.
Oh, my bad.
Yeah,
So Moose was one for you. I apologize. I jumped the gun there for a
but
second.
it's all good because I guess Steve Smith's still 1 above everybody else on the list. But like you said, the O line just couldn't work without Ryan Khalil, and I know that this is a very kind of dumb way to view it like this, but it's something I think about when I was going over this list. Every year, the NFL puts up, oh, these players are eligible for the Hall of Fame this year, like when they, because it's 5 years after they retire, and you never see. the Panthers you would see are like Luke Kuechly, he's in now. Julius Peppers, he's in now. I've seen Greg Olson be mentioned once, but every year since Khalil hung it up, I would see Ryan Khalil's name on that list. And to me, that just resonated that, hey, other people around the league actually appreciate and respect who he was for this Carolina Panthers team. For the longest time, and I know that our line was fine for the Super Bowl run up until the Super Bowl when Mike Remmers had to take some snaps, but for that entire 2010s era or late 2000s era, the O line needed him there. It just couldn't function, and we've still yet to replace Ryan Khalil since then. Like we tried, it was Matt Paradis, Pat Elfline, Cade Mays, obviously Austin Corbett. No, nobody's worked out, and I know that it's a hard billing to live up to someone like Ryan Khalil, but he really just solidified everything in the interior for Cam during those years.
It really did. And I don't think we make the 2015 Super Bowl run without him. He was a huge part of that offensive line being the force that it was. And that was, again, like all the times that you saw like kind of down spurts with the Panthers offense, a lot of times he was out of the lineup. We had a left tackle out of the starting lineup. Like he was just as foundational as other like key contributors, you would say, along the weak link system that an offense makes. And he was the backbone to that. And so I know you alluded to, and we've already talked about Musa Muhammad. He's your number one for you. For me, I have Steve Smith, who is my personal favorite Panther of all time. The fact that we got him in 2001 after drafting Dan Morgan, Chris Jenkins in the first two rounds. Then we get him at pick 74. The goal was for him to be just kind of like a special teams contributor. Maybe he evolves into a pass catcher, and he immediately becomes the first team All Pro on special teams as a returner his rookie season. And he earned his way to getting starting reps as a wide receiver, has his special breakout year in 2003 when we end up going to the Super Bowl. And then he gets the Triple Crown in 2005. And I could just keep going on and on about this guy. But if you look at a run heavy offense and the amount of pass opportunities he got in the passing game, it's amazing that he put up top 10 numbers all time. Like it really is special when the defense knows he's really their only guy. Like we talked about Musim Muhammad being a decent second option in 2008, but you kind of go throughout the list and you list guys like Kerry Colbert and Brandon LaFell and some of these running mates that he had throughout the time he was with Carolina. And really probably the best pass catcher after Musim Muhammad would be Greg Olson with the Cam Newton stint, was well past his prime. So it was really just him in the run game, and they made it work for as long as he was here in Carolina. And he's just really special player that, in my opinion, deserved to be a first ballot Hall of Famer and will, I think, eventually get in. Am I upset that he didn't get in before Luke Kuechly? No, I think Luke Kuechly should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer. Yeah, no, he missed out the first year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Am I correct in
Yeah,
saying that?
he
So
was
it's
a
just like,
second year for
yeah,
some
which
reason.
him and Bill Belichick, like that the past 2 years has kind of blown my mind. Like you have guys that are just like a cut above like everybody else. There should be no questions. I get it. Steve Smith didn't have the national light, and some of the accolades weren't necessarily there for him to go like, hey, this is a guy that should be in automatically. But again, it's just one of those things that maybe the media is too small in Carolina. We didn't get enough primetime games for the national media to kind of give us the respect, or Steve Smith the respect he's been due. But that's who's at number one for me when we look at best picks within the top 100 for the Carolina Panthers.
Still eighth all time in total receiving yards, and like maybe Mike Evans can catch him if he has another 2,000-yard seasons. Devontae Adams maybe can catch him, but he needs 2,000 more. Kelsey needs 2,000 more. And then you're going all the way down to like the next players that are active that can catch him. It's like you need Jefferson and Chase to continue to have these career years, because that's what Steve Smith was able to do throughout the majority of his career when he was healthy. Just all-time Panther. You would say that he's probably the Panther up until Cam Newton got drafted. Like Steve Smith was, and Sam Mills for the keep pounding mantra, but Steve Smith was the Panthers up until that point, or at least like the figurehead, in my opinion. Um, uh, uh, he's on the Panthers Mount Rushmore for me, with Cam, Luke, and Peppers. It's those four, in my opinion. And you nailed it. There's just not much more to say. 14,731 receiving yards, 81 receiving touchdowns. couple return, couple of rushing touchdowns as well. Um, yeah, there's not much more to say about Steve Smith. Another honorable mention that I wrote down, but I didn't say earlier, Kwan Short in the second round. Good
Yeah.
player, but kind of to my D'Angelo Williams point, also came into the league at the same time and played alongside Starla Tulele, and they fed off of each other a lot. But I, the Panthers have had some hits in the top 100, and obviously that's what you want. You want your first couple rounds to be good, but yeah, a lot of good players that we talked about so far.
Yeah, and that's how it should be. You have a Panthers history that goes for about like 30 years. You'd expect that there's some stars. KK Short probably should have deserved maybe a little bit of love, and maybe looking back at this in like 5, 10 years from now and redoing the exercise, I believe he did have a first team All Pro in 2015. I may be wrong on that, but he was a blue chip player that was a key instrumental piece for us winning games that year. I believe in the Seattle game when we went to Seattle, you had the Cam Newton, the Greg Olsen touchdown. He was the guy that I believe had the game-ending sack or pressure on Russell Wilson. And then, if you guys remember, in the playoff round, the divisional round when we hosted the Seahawks, he's the guy that got the initial pressure on Russell Wilson that forced him to throw to interception to Luke Kuechly when he was trying to target Marshawn Lynch. And that was Luke Kuechly's first pick six of the playoffs. So again, a lot of different wrinkles of like when you talk about KK Short and special moments, he was definitely one of those guys. But it's just, again, when going back to the Charles Johnson, Mike Rucker points, it's like he didn't really finish with like an all-time record for the Panthers. And then again, when you look at a guy like Derek Brown currently, is like he even the best defensive tackle in Panthers history. That's where it gets a little bit more difficult for me, and why I think he deserves being on an honorable mention list here.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would include Chris Jenkins in that discussion as well.
Yep. And
For
I,
best D
I, I didn't
tackle.
mention him. Yeah,
Mhm.
Mike Rucker. And that's where it's just like these guys are like second round picks. And in the case of Derek Brown, he was a top 10 pick. So he can't be used in this analysis. But just when you look at all time greats, a lot of times I was using the rationale of like, is he the best at this position all time? And I guess that's where if like you want to knock my take on D'Angelo Williams, Christian McCaffrey might be held a notch above. I think that's a discussion for another day. But worst picks. Do we want to start with the very worst at number one and work our way out to five, or start with kind of like five and work our way into one?
Let's just let's just get into it. Like, I'm gonna go in chronological order for mine. Um, and you alluded to this guy earlier, running back from Louisville in what year would this be? 2005. So we talked about Thomas Davis and how good he is. If I'd included first rounders coming back from 3 ACL tears and surgeries to play in the Super Bowl, broken arm in the Super Bowl, Thomas Davis all time great. But Eric Shelton, who is a running back from Louisville, had a grand total of 9 games for the Carolina Panthers. This was a second round pick 54 in 2005. He played 9 games, had 8 rushing attempts for 23 yards, and 1 reception for 6 yards. That's you just don't want that to happen out of your second round pick. You ideally want them to be more than that. It's kind of like why people scrutinize Jonathan Brooks so heavily, who looked good in OTAs today. You want more out of your first round or second round pick, especially if they're somebody that can contribute immediately. And this was before D'Angelo Williams was on the team. This was before Jonathan Stewart. In fact, D'Angelo Williams was the first round pick the following year because the run game needed to improve. So I'm going to go with the guy that not top 50, top 60 pick, who had less than 25 total rushing yards.
So Eric Shelton is at your number five spot,
Yeah,
is what you're
we'll
saying?
call it number 5. Yeah.
For me, because of the exact points that you listed, this is a 54th overall pick in 2005. He breaks his foot right out of the gate. Eric Shelton out of Louisville, the guy that you were just referencing. Again, the yardage total, his actual contribution to the team. When you look at what happened in that 2005 season, I mean, I'm sure you've somewhat vaguely remember this. Like a lot of memories have been coming up. The NFL social media account reposted the Steve Smith 200-yard
Mhm.
playoff performance against the Chicago Bears. We had Deshaun Foster go down that year. I believe Mike Goodson, who was our like no, is it Mike Goodson?
Uh,
I think it
he
was no, Mike Goodson was later. It was still a guy named Mike, I think. He had a whole tattoo sleeve on his one arm. He was like a white running back. Um, I'm gonna hold on. I gotta find the 2005 roster. But during that whole stretch, going down when we were playing the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle, we were a very run heavy team. And the thing is the Panthers were limited because we didn't have anybody to tote the ball to. So the Seahawks were able to like triple coverage Steve Smith that game. And we weren't able to do anything offensively because we lost all these guys. And Eric Shelton, again, breaking his foot and pretty much leaving the door open for all these other players that couldn't step up is, I think, a large reason why we saw the drafting of D'Angelo Williams the following year. And the guy I'm thinking of, his name doesn't even start with Mike. It's Nick Goings. I don't know if you remember
Yeah,
him,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but that was the guy where it was like we had Steven Davis that year who played 13 games, so he got hurt. And then we had Deshaun Foster, who I think got hurt in the playoffs. And he was the big playoff riser in the 2003 playoff run, having that 1 yard touchdown run against the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously having the big score in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. So again, when you lose those guys, you lose an element of how they were playing football. It really took away our opportunity to potentially return to the Super Bowl after being on the doorstep of a championship just 2 years prior. So I have him, like I said, at my number one. My number five is probably somebody that you have at like two, maybe even higher. It's Jonathan Mingo. And this guy, when you look at kind of his career accolades, he racked up a little over 400 yards his rookie year. There was maybe some talk that he could take that step going in the year two. Didn't happen. We turned around, shipped him out for a fourth round pick, and we got a little bit more value back from this bust. And he's definitely one of the worst. I'd put him up with the Everett Browns, the Terrace Marshalls, the Matt Corrals, the Will Greers, the DJ Johnsons, guys in my honorable mention. But for me, I think he did at least enough as a rookie to keep himself from being higher on this list. But he is at number five for me. Do you want to talk about where you have Mingo, or just jump into four and we get to Mingo when we get to Mingo?
Yeah, let's call him number 3 for me. And we'll just talk about him because you brought him up. He is still yet to score an NFL touchdown, and
Yep.
this was year 3 for him, I believe. Hasn't really done anything with the Cowboys. At least he got us the fourth round pick back in that deal, and I don't remember who Carolina selected with that or how Dan Morgan moved around. It was probably moved around to get Nick Scorton or something, but just the thing about Mingo is he was drafted immediately after Bryce, not immediately, 38 picks after Bryce Young, the next pick, in a year in which Carolina is going to have the number one overall pick QB, and they need receivers to help him, right? They bring in Adam Thielen, they bring in Hayden Hurst, DJ Chark, all these guys. Well, Thielen has a good year, right? Because he catches a lot of passes, but DJ Chark is out of the league right now. Hayden Hurst is out of the league right now. A lot of the offensive line that year is out of the league. And Mingo was supposed to be the guy to help Bryce Young, but ended up hurting Bryce. Bryce developed bad habits, not just because Mingo, but the whole offense there. Yeah, let's call him number 3 for me. I'll do number 4. It's somebody you mentioned, Matt Corral. He would have been an honorable mention for me, but the process in which Matt Corral was selected, I want to take you back to that year because Sam Darnold was on the roster. He wasn't very good the year before, is what we'll say. And at the time, the Cleveland Browns, this is one of the dirtiest things I've ever seen in sports. They had like backdoored Baker Mayfield to an incredible degree. I think they had already traded for Deshaun Watson at the time. So they were trying to drum up value for Baker Mayfield, even though everyone knew that Baker was not going to be on the Browns roster. And Scott Fitterer, being shrewd, I think he trades up to select Matt Corral because we don't have a second round pick that year. That's from the Darnold trade. Moves up to get Matt Corral as leverage in a Baker Mayfield deal. Then the team then trades for Baker and loses a fourth the following year. Another thing. But Matt Corral ends up, and PJ Walker gets brought in that offseason because he had played for Matt Rule at Temple. So on a team of 4 QBs going into training camp, and they all split reps, which is crazy. Matt Corral was outpaced by Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, who in hindsight, good QBs, right? It's just Carolina. PJ Walker, and then it was Matt Corral who was QB4. And you and I don't know if it was you. I was at the game, the preseason game where Corral gets hurt versus the no, Corral got hurt versus the Patriots and Darnold got hurt versus the Bills. I was at that Bills game. But long story short, Corral ends up never playing it down for the Carolina Panthers. And it was a third round QB wasted in an era where we needed a QB. So we were like, they were taking chances. And It was just completely mismanaged. He's played well in the UFL so far, and I hope he gets another chance in the league. But just what a waste of a pick that year when they were scrambling to find QBs. Uh, Funnily enough, Federer trades up to the first pick the following year for Bryce Young.
So I do have a quarterback on this list. It's obviously, like I said, honorable mentions: Matt Corral, Will Greer. They just fall
Yeah,
short of this
Greer's in my
list.
honorable mentions.
At four, I guess you could technically call this guy a quarterback, but
Uh,
these were the sins of the 2010 draft, and I mean it just has to be acknowledged because the idea was is that he could be a converted quarterback into a wide receiver or a gadget player, and he never amounted to that. And this was a guy that you used a future draft pick on, I believe it was a future second that ended up
yep.
being pick 33. And I think that's what just adds to it. Is this wasn't like a pick in our arsenal where we're throwing a dart at the board on like the end of day two, where you can kind of justify like taking just a crazy skilled athlete and hoping that they can take that jump into another position. But for me at number four, it's Armani Edwards out of Appalachian State. So like the local kid, we took him with an 89th overall pick. I just didn't pan out. I think the most highlighted play he had was a pitch and catch to Cam Newton, I think against Houston Texans their rookie year when they were pulling out some funky stuff. They had the what was the little trick play to was it wasn't Jeff King then. Jeff King, I think, had moved on, but it was our like one fullback option where they did the fumble Rooski, and I'm blanking out on the guy, but just crazy game if you remember the Panthers Texans at the end of the 2011 season. But again, that's probably the only memorable player moment I remember of Armani Edwards. Everything was all hype, and it never amounted to anything, and his career really never got going.
I have, funnily, if you want to call them both the QBs in that class, I got both of those guys in my honorable mentions. I mainly did this top five on how much each pick annoyed me, with the exception of Eric Shelton, because I wasn't super old enough to appreciate the draft process then. But yeah, Armani Edwards, in a year where they drafted three college QBs, they couldn't have all those QBs on their roster, so they converted Edwards to a wide receiver. And throughout his career, 131 receiving yards, total on 6 receptions. So good yards per reception. That's a good number, but didn't really amount to anything. Clausen, same year as well, just turbo stinker QB in the second round. Again, Carolina doesn't have a first round pick due to the Jeff Ota trade and what followed, and trading for another second the previous year. But Marty Herney can't hurt us anymore, so let's not talk about that. Um, is Jimmy Clausen on your list at all before I
He's at
move
number
on?
two for me.
Okay, so
And the reason why is
yeah,
because we took him with a top 50 pick. At the end of the day, like you invest so much draft capital into that. He was one of like four quarterbacks that got added to the Panthers roster that year. Yeah, just an absolute mess of a draft, and I think he is the crowning jewel of that disaster.
yeah. As far as QBs go, he's definitely up there. Will Greer was another honorable mention. Just an absolute waste of a pick. Every single person knew that he was never going to start. He was never going to play, and I, I'll have to give him credit. I think Cam got hurt one game, and he did play one game. Or maybe Kyle Allen got hurt, and he did play one game in which he threw, was it, or maybe it was two games, but I distinctly remember four interceptions and zero touchdowns from Will Greer during his Carolina tenure. So who he's currently on Carolina's roster right now, their practice squad roster. So weird pick there. Man, I don't know which one I want to do number two here, but it's somebody we talked about pre-recording. I think I'm going to settle on at number two. I had Ryan Khalil and Charles Johnson, both from '07, in my top five best picks within the 100 picks, just because they were two really good players. John Beeson was the first round pick that year. There was another second rounder, also from Southern Cal. That's where Ryan Khalil went. Dwayne Jarrett, the wide receiver. And I know you're excited to talk about this one. 45th overall pick. And while he does have a touchdown, something Jonathan Mingo does not, he still has in 32 games fewer receiving yards than somebody like Jonathan Mingo. And like we're talking about, this is '07. This is right before Carolina gears up for a significant playoff run the following year. Dwayne Jarrett just did really nothing for this team.
he started this trend where like wide receivers out of USC, players out of USC did not amount to anything. It is very much more of a recent trend with guys like Drake London, Jordan Addison, Monroe St. Brown, hopefully
Michael
Makai Lemon.
Pittman. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael Pitt. Like you have these guys that have actually produced in the NFL, but for the longest time, like those 2000s, early 2010s, like USC players actually stunk it up like to high heaven. And Dwayne Jarrett was one of those. He was a guy that was supposed to be the running mate next to Steve Smith. It hadn't worked with Kerry Colbert, a guy that we had drafted, was kind of in the wings when we had Steve Smith, Musa Muhammad, Ricky Prohl. And we never could find that second running mate for Steve Smith. And really, I don't think we ever really had another guy until like Greg Olson much later on. Like we attempted with Brandon LaFell a little bit later on in some of these drafts. And he did better than Dwayne Jarrett, but he by no means was a good wide receiver number two. And that's the reason why he didn't stay in Carolina. But just all these different things you can go down the list of. And it's like you have less career receiving yards than a guy like Jonathan Mingo. You're going to be at number three for me. This is a guy that there was so much expectation for you to be that dude across from Steve Smith. And you're the guy that gets favorable matchups. Like they're rolling the safety and the number one cornerback over the Steve Smith side. Like at least in Jonathan Mingo's like favor, like it's like his running mates were DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, who was much older at that point in his career, where like they aren't nearly taking away the pressure that will come off you in coverage. And he wasn't able to capitalize on that. So it was just very, very frustrating. And as a Panthers fan, like growing up, that's the one that kind of stings. Like you were saying, like Eric Shelton, even though he is number one just because he did absolutely nothing, Dwayne Jarrett is like pretty much right in that ballpark for doing next to like absolutely nothing. Like I was just saying about Eric Shelton, but it's just in a way that frustrated you because his whole point was to create a dynamic atmosphere in your offense that never materialized during the Steve Smith era.
Have you said your entire top five to this point?
So Eric Shelton, mentioned Jimmy Clausen's at two, Dwayne Jarrett's at three, Armani Edwards is at four, and Jonathan Mingo's at
Okay.
five. So those are my five. They have been mentioned at some point during this segment. And yeah, that's who I have
I,
as being
well,
the all-time stinkers.
I still have my number two. I'm gonna move this guy up to number one just because it like inferior. I'll move Dwayne Jarrett down to number two. First, I'm gonna say DJ Johnson, honorable mention. Traded up to get him, like 24-year-old edge rusher who uh, can't rush the passer. So he's an honorable mention. Can you guess who my number one least favorite or worst pick is in the top 100? It is. I'll tell you. I'll give you a hint.
It's going to be DJ Johnson, is
No,
it
no, no.
not?
He's an honorable mention.
Okay,
Johnson
he's an
is.
honorable mention.
I'll give you a hint. It's within the last 10 years.
So you've already listed off Mingo, Dwayne Jarrett. You had Matt Corral in your top four. You mentioned Eric Shelton.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Will Greer?
No, Will
Or
Greer's
is
an
he an
honorable
honorable
mention.
mention? So he didn't
Here's
make
your
it either.
second hint. He was in the same draft as Will Greer. He went before him.
He went before Will
So it
Greer.
was
Hold
Brian
on.
Burns, this player, and then Will Greer.
Brian Burns. Hold on. Now I gotta back up a little bit. I he
Dude,
played in 31 games. He
he
played like
Greg Little, the second round pick in 2019, pick 37. He was like the one. I'll have to go back. It felt like he was the 100th player on the consensus board. Not a single person on the draft panel or on Twitter anywhere at the time said this was a good pick. And even knowing at the time it was horrible, he was not good a single rep in which he played for the Carolina Panthers. This is a left tackle, by the way. This guy was supposed to be the left tackle of the future after the Matt Khalil incident didn't work out. This guy, second round pick, it's like, oh, the team had been successful with Taylor Moton 2 years prior or 3 years prior at converting him to a long-term tackle. Greg Little never material in an era, by the way, where we needed to protect Cam because he was getting hurt at the end of his Panthers tenure, the first Panthers tenure. We needed to protect him. Greg Little out of Ole Miss, absolutely terrible. Every time he might be the worst Panthers offensive lineman in the last 10 years, and that's including guys like Cam Irving, Pat Elflein, that Trent Scott, Michael Jordan, all those guys. Greg Little is probably the worst out of all of them. I couldn't stand that pick at the time, and it still fires me up, because what a wasted draft when you came off of DJ Moore, Dante Jackson the year before, then the year before that, McCaffrey, Curtis Samuel, Taylor Moton. All you got was Brian Burns out of that 2019 draft.
So I get that. I hear what you're saying. I guess for me is he played in more games.
Uh, uh,
Um
he uh, he wasn't playing. He was out there, but he wasn't necessarily performing.
Maybe that's fair. Like I didn't have as harsh because like for me it's like Eric Shelton, like he barely played at all. Jimmy Clausen, he did play games in 2010, but it's like he was thrown in because like we had no other options at quarterback, and he completely stunk it up. I think he won one game out of the eight he played. We only won two games all that year. Going down the list, like Dwayne Jarrett, Jonathan Mingo, like they did absolutely nothing. I get it. I get what you're saying, Greg Little. He should have at least been in my honorable mentions there, and that's a gap on my part. But I don't know. I don't see it as the travesty as you have it for the number one guy on your list. But hey, to each their own. He's definitely a stinker, but was not on my radar. So that's a little bit of a surprise on my end.
Dennis Daly, same draft, went almost 200 picks later, vastly outperformed. He beat him on the depth chart year one. You never see sixth rounders go ahead of second rounders in their rookie year on the depth chart because that just the team is admitting a mistake at that point. Even if the team knows who the better players are, they'll give the guys a chance, right? It's like they had Jonathan Mingo ahead of Leggett in their rookie years, right? Just because Legette's a rookie. But yeah, that's such a crazy pick to me at the time. And to follow it up with Will Greer, right at pick 100. That's why he didn't make my list because he was right at pick 100, or he was an honorable mention. Just what an all timer bad draft that year.
Yeah, no, it's definitely goes down as one of the worst for me. It's definitely going to be 2010. I have two people from that
Yeah,
draft on
Downs.
this list.
But I mean,
Um,
that's part of the like in terms of process, Marty Herney didn't set themselves up for success because no first round pick, right? Um, he moved around to get multiple thirds and four sixth rounders that year, but they didn't really have a top pick to take a swing. You know, maybe you could envision them getting. I don't even remember who was in the 2010 draft. That was Indomitian. No, he was 08. But maybe they could have gotten somebody good if they had a first rounder. It's just the way that Marty Herney maneuvered back then. He didn't necessarily have a first rounder for all those years.
and that does impact it. He should have just loaded up and traded like second round picks like Bill Belichick and done the like one up year tax and just snuck into the first round and made selections, and our team would have been star studded. But unfortunately, hindsight is 2020. Is there anything else, I guess, Panthers historically wise you want to touch on before we jump out of here? Obviously, we have our takes coming up. But anything in regards to this discussion that you wanna hit at before we move on?
Yeah, shout out Curtis Samuel first because good player. And looking at Dan Morgan's draft at least, or his three drafts, last year rookie of the year, obviously in the first round, and I think Nick Scorton's a promising player. But the year before that, this is a huge year for all three of those top 100 players: Xavier Leggett, Jonathan Brooks, and Trevin Wallace. All three of whom, as it currently stands, would not make the top five best picks. Probably they're probably on the outside of the top five worst if things don't pan out, but hopefully some good things happen there. And that's going to go into my take. This is a hard one to gauge because we're looking at the future here. But I think that Nick Scorton, the 51st overall pick, he was a second round pick. I think we would find him if we do this exercise again in 5 years. We'd find him at least in the honorable mentions. I like the trajectory that Scorton has, 5 sacks already as a rookie. And now that he has a real edge rusher opposite him with Jalen Phillips and a real player behind him in Devin Lloyd, I think that Nick Scorton, let's say his weighted AV, because that's a metric that we can use to compare across positions, excuse me, within the next 5 years, uh, we'll say it's 30 or above. So like he's been a very high contributor. For reference, T Mac has a AV of 9 this past year, and that was rookie of the year. So Scourton's going to have to average 6 over the next couple of years to get to that point. It's a hard one to measure, but I think Scourton will find himself if we redid this list in 2031, he would he'd be in the top 10 to 12 there.
That's an interesting take. I'm kind of torn on being a. I you know what I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. So Taylor Moton, he doesn't have any first team All Pros. He doesn't have any Pro Bowls to his name. He was an honorable mention for me. He was in the Curtis Samuel draft that you just brought up. Um, I think, and it's hard to say this because I like where you're saying with Nick Scorton and leading into this, we have yet to even see this guy play. I'm going to go ahead and say Monroe Freeling in 10 years from now will at least be an honorable mentions. I think he is a guy that will supplant Ike Ekwonu, and he will either end up moving inside or just hit free agency. Maybe we move him around. Maybe he decides to play right tackle, and that's our plan for the future there. But I think Monroe Freeling will become the best left tackle we've had since Jordan Gross. And the thing is Jordan Gross, Ike Ekwonu, both top 10 picks. So they're omitted from this analysis to begin with. I guess we could have used, like, if a top 10 pick was a complete bust, like we had a Kevin White, in essence, a guy that we drafted in the
Yeah.
top 10. That's a guy we could have brought up in our top 10, or top 5 in this list and ranking. But for me, Monroe Freeling will be that cornerstone franchise left tackle that we have not had since Jordan Gross. I think it's hard to say he'll be a top 5 guy. We haven't seen him play, but I mean, his build, his trajectory, the way they're probably going to ease him into the lineup, things look very favorable, at least from that perspective, that I'm willing to bank on that as a take.
I like that. Do you think Monroe Freeling starts game 1 this year?
You see, like, because he is pick 19, I think it's more than the contract you handed to Rasheed Walker. I think it's going to depend on how training camp goes and if he's NFL ready. Like, they know when those guys come in conditioning wise if they're ready or not. I don't think they're going to rush him onto the field if they don't think he's ready because they have Walker. But I do think with the investment there and their trust in taking a guy there, he will be the starter day one.
I like it. I'm going through all the Panthers' top 10 picks, and real the like I think the jury's out on Bryce, or like still out on Bryce Young. If he's bad this year, it's just a bad pick. But really, no bad top 10s. Maybe Tim Biakabatuka, I would say. He didn't only 2,500 career rushing yards, so definitely didn't live up to the billing there. But followed it up with Musa Muhammad the next pick, so it it all worked out. A lot of hits in the top 10 for Carolina, so it's hopefully it could. We didn't have a top 10 pick this year, but hopefully the hits continue this season. I'm not sure what we'll talk about over the summer period up until training camp and stuff like that. We'll probably do more broad NFL things, draft related. We'll do our team draft again. But we will be back over the summer. And until we get to our next episode, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts, excuse me. Steve's been working on a new album, I guess, for Apple Music, but maybe we'll debut that one day. You can find us on Twitter, YouTube, wherever you get your content. And until next time, keep pounding.